Welcome to Real People, Real Matters. This is Diana Tulchinsky with my first guest, Valerie McCune. Valerie, please tell me about your earlier life in the North Shore area.
So I grew up in Skokie. I was the youngest of three kids, and then I moved into the city for a little bit, and then I met my husband, and we moved to Glenview to raise our children. So,
were you inspired by any artists, or did your parents persuade you to go into the art industry, or?
So, because I was the youngest of three children, my parents either ran out of money or patience or whatever, and when I proposed I wanted to go to art school, they said, "What's your plan?" And I really didn't have a plan except to be an artist. So they said, "You're not going to be an artist, you're going to have to do something else."
Yeah, something practical and bring some money.
Right.
So what type of school did you first get into?
So my father was a pharmacist, and his father was a pharmacist, so it just seemed like a natural course of events that I would try to get into pharmacy school. So I did that for about a year, and it just didn't feel right. It wasn't for me. And so I dropped out, moved back home, and my mother had a friend who was a court reporter.
Oh, interesting.
And said, "This would be a great opportunity for you. She has an agency and she's making, a living." So I went to court reporting school, and I finished that. I got my associate's degree, and I did that for about 10 years in the city.
Interesting. How many words per minute do you have to type in that machine in stenography?
I think it's 200 words a minute. It's something
That's
really
amazing.
Crazy, yeah. But so I was using my hands, but not the way I wanted to as an artist. And
how did you get involved in the art museums? And was it accidental, or?
So because I was working in the city, I would take my court reporting machine after jobs and just walk around, and I realized the Art Institute was right down where I was working. So I decided to go in, and I signed up for a faux finishing or decorative painting class for 6 weeks, and it just opened my world up to, this is what I want to do. It wasn't quite the canvas I wanted to work on, but it was walls and ceilings and murals, and so I started doing that with a designer who hired me to help him, and I slowly got out of the court reporting business and started to gear towards my art.
So were you kind of burnt out, or did it give you that freedom or that inspiration to become an artist and persuading people to go into full finishing?
So it kind of renewed me to be able to do something, that I wanted to do. It wasn't quite, I hadn't quite finished my degree in art, so that was kind of bothering me, that I hadn't done that practically. So I was a hands-on, self-taught kind of person. And I hired a couple people to help me work, and then I actually landed into a place called Point of Origin, which is in Glenview. It was a fabulous furniture store. The owner permitted me to paint all the walls, so that got people to come in and pick a wall that they wanted done in their house, and the designers used me to do that kind of, end result.
How long were you full finishing for?
So I still continue to dabble in it, as far as furniture. I can do some smaller pieces, but I did it for over 25 years.
Wow.
And I actually was with a group of girls, and we did all the export fitness clubs. I was on scissor lifts and ladders and scaffolding, and it was, when I look back, I don't even know how I physically did it, but it was, like I said, it was another canvas for me, so to speak.
Why were you going back to school to get an art degree, or when did you do that?
So that always felt kind of strange. My kids ended up, I raised them in Glenview for 17 years, and when they were at the end of finishing high school, I thought I need to do something for me. I mean, I was single mothering them for since they were 3 and 6. So a lot of my energy was put on them, and I decided to focus on myself a little bit. So I decided to go back to school at Northeastern, and they took all my pharmacy credits and my court reporting credits, and I was in something called an interdisciplinary program, and that landed me my bachelor's degree. I was able to go back and just kind of get into my core classes of art, painting, drawing. It created a community for me. I loved that community. I'm still friends with some of the people that I took classes with.
Are there any projects that you worked in at Northeastern?
So I worked on a project with the girl at Northeastern. Her name was Rochelle. It was something called show pods. And it was these pods that were set aside, these little window pods that were set aside in the Pilsen district to showcase some huge pieces that we had done. So the piece I did with this girl was done with about 3,000 glue sticks.
Wow.
Where we had used the glue and put it on top of newspapers and ripped it and kind of weaved it back together. And it took up an entire window. We draped it across, almost like drapes across a window. And it popped up as a memory for me on Facebook that I had done that maybe 4 years ago. And it was such a crazy, fun, but we had to work as a team to get it done. And then at night, everybody came to look at it, so we had it backlit with lights, and that was just I just love that project. Another project I did with Northeastern was we did a mural, and that's at Diversity in California. So it was a mural class. There was maybe 12 of us. We had to come up with the idea. We had to infiltrate it, the idea. We had to figure out how to put it on the wall. We actually had to scrape all the junk off the wall and give it some primer. And we snapped grid lines, and we transferred our image. And I think that one was maybe 16 feet tall by 50 feet wide. It was really fun. That was another great project.
Was the glue sticks about childhood or teenagehood, or it was just
it was about transformation. It was about decay. It was about things falling apart and coming back together again. There was it felt a little bit like nature also. And it was interesting because we didn't know, but we were each doing a glue stick project. So our teacher put us together for this project to make that happen. And
what is the setbacks and actually the perks of going back to school as a mature student in the 30s and the 40s versus the 20-year-old?
It's a great question. So the opportunity that my parents said I couldn't go to art school, right? And I decided to do it anyway, eventually on my own. It created this more appreciation. I think that if my parents would have let me go to art school, I probably would have, who knows where I would have been, right? So I was so determined that this is what I wanted to do, that going back to school, I was such an eager person. I wanted to learn and take it all in, and being around younger people. I was one of the older people in the room. So it gave me a broader perspective of the way they're thinking, how we interacted. But on some level, we were all, the playing field had been leveled in a certain way because we were all going towards one goal together.
How is the social life, like in the campus and everything else between a 20-year-old and a mature student? Did you notice any friction or anything like that?
Well, I wasn't invited to a lot of the parties, but anytime any of us had a little opening, we'd all show up to support each other that way. And I do have a couple friends that are still from there that are in their 20s that see me as kind of an equal. Yes. So that's nice.
What opportunities that bachelor's versus that associate's opened up for you later?
So I'm actually back at school right now in graduate school to further on my education. because I started to realize a couple years ago that I needed to get off the ladders.
Was it physically demanding or
Really
was it,
physically demanding and emotionally demanding, and you're dealing with people and their
directing
needs.
them, and then like the inside product has to be finished within 2 weeks, but physically is too exhausting. I
Yeah, it was
understand.
exhausting. It was exhausting. So I, my parents, I mean, this is part of my story, is my parents ended up in a nursing home.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that they were getting all their activity needs met. And so I went in one day and there was an art class being offered. So I went in the back and I just saw it wasn't
that standard.
Yeah, it wasn't the standard of how I would like to have seen it done. So, and I had some previous experience of also teaching art classes at a place called Pino's Palette
Oh, that's in the Glen.
in the Glen, and also at Tipsy Paint. So I was doing some of these sip and paint classes already and teaching to large groups of people, and I thought, I could teach this class at this nursing home that my parents are in and create a painting with Val class, so to speak. So the activities coordinator loved it. The people loved it. I was making people happy. I love this population. So right now I have about 16 different places I teach at.
Oh, nice. Can you tell me more about your mom's struggle with the markers or how?
Oh yeah. So my mom, she was interesting. She did a lot of calligraphy, and they were both artistic, but that wasn't their job, so to speak. So my mother had an obsession with coloring in her clothes, her furniture, her shoes. She had dementia, and that was keeping her busy. And I actually was encouraging it by going to thrift stores and finding things that needed to be colored, a pillow or a purse. So at the end of her life, I was at Northeastern at school for finishing my bachelor's degree, and they asked me to curate a show around all the things that she had colored in. So it was called, I called it Mainly Markers because that's what she had used. And we kind of reinvented her room. We created this space of her room at the library, and it was open for anybody to see. And it was kind of an ode to my mother.
To her memory.
Yes. Yeah, it was yes, exactly. And and so I'm furthering my education because I love working with this population. So I decided to go into the gerontology program there. And I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it.
Do you want to become an art therapist and help people, guide them along, the painful process of getting older, even taking care of their parents, like a lot of the emotional technique of letting go and accepting that their parents are just different?
Yeah, as I'm getting older, I do think about, quality of life and staying creative, and how those two things are really important, how to sustain your quality of life. I think that creativity is a muscle we don't use enough of. And so I consider myself more of a creative coach when I'm going into these places, or I'm coaching them. I'm finding your strengths, your weaknesses, I'm working with your strengths. And the end result, everybody is always super happy with. So I thought maybe art therapy. Yeah, I thought maybe in the program doing something where I am, but doing it with older adults.
Older adults, helping them feel better. And so, how long have you been into Tipsy Paint, and what's the difference between lecturing people of how to make like a prototype versus helping them release their story?
Right. Well, I was just at when I'm working at when I was working at Pino's Palette or Tipsy Paint, they had a certain direction, a certain painting, and I had to do it their way, right?
Yes.
So now I get to do it my way. I get to do my teaching methods the way I'd like. So yesterday I was actually at Brookdale, which is a nursing home, assisted living place. It's in Glenview, and it's a higher functioning group. And I always bring some blank canvases, and I bring some canvases that have a little mark making on them, and then they can take it further. And so I try and talk to them about color mixing, and like I said, I go up to every person and try to get them to finish their painting where they'll be happy with it. And they ask for my suggestions, and it always comes out different. I'm releasing something, and I'm creating kind of a Zen moment for them.
Does it help with Alzheimer's or memory loss, or?
I think it ignites a memory sometimes. When I'm teaching people who have Alzheimer's or dementia, I can see a little spark of, oh, I remember this. I remember doing this. Or maybe it's creating a time of, gee, I really like doing this. This is something I've always wanted to do, right? So, and when I do my own paintings and my own, it's kind of my escape also.
Where did you have your gallery openings and some of the work displayed?
So I've been in the Highland Park Art Center quite a bit with some of my work. There's always a theme to things, so I try to, themes and deadlines always work well for me. So if there's a theme of a show and a deadline to get it in, it'll get me motivated to go, oh, okay, well, that's something I was thinking about. I actually just auctioned a piece off last weekend at something called One Inspired Evening, and Inspiration Corporation is behind that, which was started by my friend, Lisa Nigro. And all the money goes to help the homeless. So that was kind of a big gala event, you get your art in there. But I'm constantly getting into shows. I'm constantly trying to exhibit my work. Like I said, it creates these Zen moments, and it gathers people. Like if I have a little opening, it's gathering my friends, and there's discussion that's ignited. And so all of that is what I love about it.
And then please tell me, as a single mom, how did you encourage your kids to go into art? Or like, what was like that alert that you had to buy, like a piece of pastel or paper for your kids?
So I was always the mother who let my kids play with Play-Doh.
Yes.
And whatever they wanted to do, if they painted on their walls, there was always a space to allow that to happen, the freedom of that to happen. But they also went to school at the Glenview schools, and there was opportunity for them to, I almost was jealous. I wanted to go back to high school. There was so many opportunities for them to stay creative. My son was actually musical. So he was on the drum line in Glenview high schools. My daughter was more on the plays. She loved to do the plays. But they're both creative. My daughter kind of dabbles in watercolor. My son is more of a sketch artist. And they're both, it's interesting because they're both at a crossroads of trying to figure out some things in their life. And I want them to be able to do whatever they want to do, as opposed to what my parents said, no, I couldn't. So my son is now working for JP Morgan, but he's maybe struggling a little bit that it's not creative enough for him. So his mistress is music, so he does some DJing and things like that on the side. My daughter just is finishing up culinary school, which is creative. But she's finding out she's really good at writing and journaling. And so maybe that'll be her path. I feel like there's a path for everybody it doesn't have to necessarily, it might not go in a linear fashion, so.
And tell me more about your website, what merchandise inspired that website and selling that merchandise to people.
So I do have a couple websites. One is for my sip-in painting, and the other one is my personal website. So that personal website, it talks about the mixed media pieces that I do. And so I have, it's interesting. So I found a place where I can take what I've done, which is mixed media, collage. I take a JPEG of it, a picture of it. I send it to this place, and they can put it on, they can take that JPEG and they can transfer it onto t-shirts, onto blankets, onto tapestry, onto clothes. So it's just kind of a side thing that's there, and and I can always add to it, and it's just really interesting. And so it's not me directly that has to carry all the t-shirts, all the clothes, you know,
yes.
so they kind of take care of that inventory of getting it out for me. I make a little bit of money, but it's more about just staying creative, you know, that I'm out there on the internet, you know, doing that kind of thing.
Please tell me your favorite artist or what inspired you for your pieces.
So I do love Ed Peschke, who is kind of a, you know, he uses a lot of bright colors in things that he does, and some of it is a little surreal, and
Yes.
I really love him. And of course, some of the greats, you know, I love Matisse, who it feels like there's some cutting out happening. He was kind of a collage artist. And the Art Institute, let's go there one day. I'll show you all my favorite artists. Yeah.
Do you have any endeavors in teaching more, or what are you planning to do after you get that certificate in gerontology?
Well, I still am doing these sip and paint nights or parties. I do those at night. So I've taken, so there's two things. So I've taken what I've learned from Tipsy Paint and Pino's Palette, and again, done it my way. So I have a certain, each place had a different style of teaching, and I incorporated the things I liked best out of both places, and that's what I use whenever I teach at night. I also do private parties. I'll come to your house. I set it up as long as you have tables and chairs. I'll set it up like a studio, and you get to pick the painting, and that's kind of fun.
Is there anyone that I've been looking around these places, but is there anyone that is simply unteachable? Like simply you can't draw a line, or is there anyone?
You know, that's a really great question. I think that I'm not looking for perfection when I'm teaching. I'm just looking for something more than let's get you out of a stick figure phase, right?
Yes.
So, and really the world, if you look around, it's just shapes. If you know, our face is ovals, our hands are squares and rectangles, right? Our torso is maybe a rectangle. So as long as you know what a circle and a triangle and a square is, I can get you to draw and to paint. I really can. And there's some people that surprise themselves who say, they get nervous.
Yes, some people do.
It's very interesting. I say, don't fear the art. You know, it's just a paint and brush, and there's nothing to fear.
Do you believe that it helped raise the grades up in normal grade school and junior high when parents see their kids too much on TV or doing erratic behavior like Nintendo? How do you pressure them to go into the arts? Is it natural, or do you have to persuade them?
I think we do spend a lot of time sitting next to each other instead of across from each other, and it's nice to, like video gaming. You're sitting next to each other. You're in a car. You're looking down at your phone. I really was fortunate to be raising my kids before they had the cell phones and all that technology, but if I ever put something in front of them as far as paper or paint, I definitely think that a child would choose that.
Yes,
you know?
Rather than
right.
texting on the car or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a, and I do feel like some of that is their freedom to be on Instagram and some of these, sites, that there is some creativity maybe behind it, but there's nothing like pencil and paper, and you can always carry that with you. You can always have a little sketchbook with you because that's an easy thing,
And why did you choose to be an art therapist or instead of a commercial artist or even a graphic artist? I mean, what was your story that persuaded you to go into that field?
Well, so I'm still so art therapy is what it would be my end goal.
Yes.
Right. So, and I do feel like life is about sometimes just the journey, not the end. And so going back for my bachelor's degree just kind of ignited this other thing in me about, like I said, community, maybe my abilities, getting critiqued by other people. I hadn't had that in a long time. As an artist, it's kind of you're kind of in a lonely place. You don't really have somebody telling you, or you're not feeding off of anybody. It's just you know. So, and then when I segued into teaching these older adults, or even at night, these sip and paint parties, I realized I was really good at it.
Oh, nice.
So I feel that I would have something to offer as an art therapist to people. And we'll see. Maybe I'll try it. Maybe my journey will take me somewhere else.
Exactly, exactly. So how did you like the Glenview area compared, even living there with your kids versus like anywhere else in the North Shore?
Well, right now I'm living in Evanston, but Glenview was a great place. And when I drive into Glenview to see my friends, it's like, oh, I miss it here. I really do. I lived in the Glen, and it was a nice, safe place. You know, it wasn't the diversity maybe that was around where I'm living now, but I knew it was safe. I knew my kids were getting a great education, and I met some great people. Most of my friends are from the Glenview area. So,
do you have any advice for kids that are looking around, like at 16 or 18? Like, would you send them to commercial design, Harrington or Art Institute, or something practical to get their feet wet? What type of advice would you give them?
Well, I think that there's so much more available as far as the internet is concerned, as far as graphic design or medical renderings, or there's so much more available than when I was in school. But I would encourage them to follow their dream, absolutely. Give me a call, I'll talk to them.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Valerie McCune, for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me.
This is Real People, Real Matters with Diana Tulchinsky. Please watch us again.